A bee was flying from flower to flower, sipping sweet nectar and pollen. It was a hot summer day, and the bee was very thirsty. As it flew, it saw a beautiful flower far off in the distance and flew towards it. When the bee reached the flower, it noticed that it had a big, fat, juicy stem. The bee landed on the stem and began drinking the sweet flower juice. It drank and drank until it was very full. Then it started to feel sleepy. As the bee slept, a little girl walked by. She saw the bee sleeping on the flower and thought it would make a great addition to her collection of insects. You see, the girl was an insect collector. She had a net and a jar to catch and keep insects in. She wanted to catch the bee and put it in her jar. The girl took her net and approached the bee. The bee woke up and saw the girl with the net. It knew it had to escape before the girl caught it. The bee flew away quickly, but it wasn't fast enough. The girl was able to catch the bee with her net and put it in her jar. The bee was very scared. It didn't know what was going to happen to it. The girl looked at the bee and smiled. She knew just what to do. The girl took the bee outside and put it on a leaf. Then she poured some flower juice on the leaf. The bee was very thirsty, so it began drinking the flower juice. After the bee drank its fill, the girl talked to it. She told the bee how beautiful it was and how important it is for the ecosystem. The bee listened to the girl and realized that she wasn't going to hurt it. The girl and the bee became friends. The girl continued to take care of the bee, giving it flower juice to drink and making sure it was comfortable. After a while, the bee felt strong enough to fly away. It said goodbye to the girl and flew off into the distance. The girl was sad to see her friend go, but she was happy knowing that it was free. The girl continued to collect insects, but she never kept them in her jar. She would simply observe them and then let them go. She learned from the bee that every living thing is important and should be respected. The bee flew back to the flower patch where it had been drinking flower juice. All of the other bees were very happy to see it return. They told the bee all about how dangerous the insect collector was and how she had captured many of their friends. The bee listened to its friends and realized how lucky it was to have escaped. From that day on, the bee was more careful around humans. It continued to collect pollen and nectar from flowers, but it always kept an eye out for danger. The bee lived a long and happy life, and it never forgot its friend, the insect collector girl, the bee, and the flower. A bee was buzzing around a garden looking for nectar and pollen. It came across a beautiful flower and landed on it. The bee began collecting pollen and nectar, and it was so focused that it didn't notice the flower wilt and die. When the bee finally looked up, it saw that it was too late. The flower had died, and there was nothing left for the bee to collect. The bee was sad, but it knew that it couldn't stay in the dead flower. It flew away and found another flower to collect pollen and nectar from. This time, the bee was more careful. It noticed that the flower was wilting, but it didn't land on it. Instead, it waited until the flower was revived, and then it began collecting pollen and nectar. The bee continued on in its life cycle, collecting pollen and nectar from flower to flower. It never forgot the lesson it had learned from the dead flower. The bee knew that it had to be careful and not stay in one flower for too long. Otherwise, the flower would wilt and die, and there would be no more flowers for the bee to collect pollen and nectar from.